Good afternoon, morning, or potentially evening. I know other people say that quite a lot, but I figured I might as well give it a go because there's no reason not to under the circumstances. I don't imagine it's been copyrighted, and even if it had, they probably wouldn't have started with afternoon, then moved to morning, then evening. That's a sporadic, if not insane, way of approaching things. But on the topic of, sporadic and or insane things, you're listening to the 30th episode of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast, a Warhammer 40,000 podcast made, developed, produced and or delivered by an assortment of friends who, on this occasion, have mostly abandoned me. But not good old Phil. How you doing, Phil?
I'm still here. I'm the only one.
We're the last two left standing, mate. Episode 30, and it's the lowest turnout we've ever had.
No, it was the dedication, obviously, that we all have pitched in. Joe's clearly just gotten tired of it all and sacked it in. Richard, he's just had too much trouble with the quiz. He couldn't come up with the questions. He's not doing it. I mean, there may be segments where they do pop up, but, they're not here right now.
They're not here right now, and today is Wednesday the 25th of September. And there is only one more feasible day where I can do any sort of recording prior to doing all the edits and getting it up live. And to be honest with you, the likelihood that I'm going to have an appetite to do that tomorrow, Thursday the 26th, is so low, I think it's safe to say that it's just going to be you and me through the entirety. Because, you know what, even though it is episode 30, I don't much care for this lazy, lackadaisical attitude from, these so-called friends of ours.
We have to make Joe do a special Joe show episode where he just does all the work.
Well, exactly. I would love
People
that.
Will love that. People love it.
I mean, that's the thing, man. I would very much be keen for him to, to do all the work. That would be nice. Yes. Although, based on his intermittent performance, I imagine if I got him to do all the work, nothing would happen.
Or if you got him to edit it, then it definitely wouldn't. If you just got him to sort of sit and chat, I'm sure we could do that.
Well, that's all he does anyway.
Yeah, but just do more of it.
Fair enough. I'm only being funny, though. Obviously, we love Joe, and we wish he was here with us, but unfortunately, he is doing other stuff that he has deemed more important. Whatever that is, we don't entirely know. He has a fantastic habit of just basically saying, "No, I can't do it." And I was like, okay, cool. Why is that? Leave me alone. Okay, brilliant. All right, well, we'll wait and see what occurs.
I suspect it was his girlfriend had listened to the previous episode where he talked about having multiple girlfriends, and she's busy having words with him about it.
That could have been true, actually. He could have landed himself in a spot of bother after being so open and honest about his many, many lovers.
Yeah.
He should know better, really. I mean, this is the thing. Just because he doesn't listen to the podcast doesn't mean that others don't even.
That's true. I mean, it gives us free rein to say what we want about him. Because
Exactly.
we know that he's not going to listen to it as well.
This is the great thing about this, is the knowledge that we know that he is never going to be listening to this. And, the fact that he is the worst. If only that were true. No, of course he's not. Again, sorry, Joe, that you're not here. Or that we can't be more flexible to work around you, you diva. But you're just going to have to miss out on the fame and glory of appearing on the show this time around, although seemingly being the topic of much discussion. In fact, actually, I believe I'm hanging out with Joe on Friday night, so that also seals the deal that he's definitely not going to appear on this, because that means if I'm hanging out with him Friday night, I need to edit this episode Thursday, because I can't edit Friday. Therefore, there's just no time available, basically. I'm going to be playing...
That's true.
Me and Joe are going to be doing an Iron Hands on Iron Hands mirror match to see who has the better Iron Hands army.
Oh, wow. Is this because you did an Iron Hands test match last week, wasn't it? Or earlier this week?
So we've done 3 test matches again in varying forms. So Joe has an Iron Hands list. I have an Iron Hands list. I played against Joe with my Iron Hands list against his old Drakari Harlequins tournament combo and tore it to pieces. And Joe played against my Eldari flyer list and he tore that to pieces with Iron Hands. So yeah, it's really interesting. It seems that the Iron Hands are, at least in the playtesting we've done, have torn through Drakari and Eldari of all forms, because They just have lots and lots of shots doing multiple amounts of damage, and because of their command infrastructure and insane durability, the weight of shot strategy that the Eldari operate under, i.e. that kind of death by many cuts approach, doesn't really do anything against the Iron Hands, thanks to the stone of something or other that basically means that they get to lower the...
Iron Stone?
Yeah, so it reduces damage to vehicles, so you can create this really devastating bubble. So you have the Tech Marine matey boy who gives them a 5-up invuln and can start healing people for free hit wounds every movement phase. You then have a lieutenant, which obviously is allowing you to reroll the ones, and then you take a chapter master to allow you to reroll your misses, and then you just take Leviathan dreadnoughts with 2 storm cannons, and they will just rinse anything you point them at, because the ballistic skill 2+, even with -3 to hit modifiers from lightning fast and all the other shenanigans, you're still hitting on 5s, re-rolling everything, and when you've got 20 shots going off at those flyers, you're still... I mean, I was still generating about 10 hits off the back of that, and then you're wounding on 3s, re-rolling 1s, so I was getting something like 7-8 wounds every time off on one of these flyers, and it's -3 because you're Iron Hands, they don't get an invuln, so they get like 8 saves, of which they fail 7, and then you go, cool, that's 14 damage, it's dead. And it's like, oh,
no.
Woo. So yeah, against Crimson Hunters and other things, I mean, okay, fair enough, if you're smart, you can play the range game, but the problem is you just can't do enough damage, and even if you do, you never seem to kill them, and they just walk, and then your your Tech Priest walks up behind and goes, ding ding, 6 wounds back for 1 CP, and they're fine again, and they just keep gumming at you.
Is it a flat 6, or is it a flat 3, but it can do it twice?
Yeah, it's a flat 3 doubled for 1 CP.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's bananas, mate. Honestly, it's super good. And you just, I mean, the Leviathan, I mean, it's got 14 or 16 wounds, I can't remember exactly, maybe it is 14. But you just, like, so when I played against Joe, my Hemlock shot at the Leviathan. I got 5 shots, of which 4 of them wounded, right? Now, in normal old school circumstances, admittedly against the Leviathan, he'd still get the 4-up invulns, but ultimately in this instance, yeah, so he'd still get the 4-up invulns, but obviously Jink had been cast on the thing, so it was 5-up invulns. He passed 1 of the 5-up invulns, and then the remaining 3 wounds only did 3 damage, and he feel no pained 1 of them. So what should have been potentially 8 damage turned into 2. It's like, what? What? And then in the preceding, in his next turn, he's went, boop, healthy again. It's mad. And then if you try and charge them, they've got ballistical 5+ when being charged. They're just, honestly, mate, the Iron Hands, they're so good. I mean, and that's what we're going to discover when we get together and play. Which of us has the better Iron Hands army? What strategy is better? They're very, very similar. He's using war suits. I'm using Redemptor Dreads. We've both got Leviathans. We've both got 3 units of Intercessors. We're both using Storm Talons. We're both using Whirlwinds. The only difference between his army list and my army list is I'm using a Librarian and he's using an Ancient. And I've got a worm in mine, a Bone Jubbins worm from Blackstone Fortress.
And because it's unaligned, right, you don't lose your chapter bonuses?
Yeah, correct, because it's keyword unaligned. I don't lose my chapter bonuses.
Everyone assumes it's a building, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not a building. It's a little worm. It's a little worm. I'm saying it's the pet of my chapter master. It's his little pet worm.
Oh, brilliant. And what colours are your armies actually painted as? Because I imagine they're not black.
No, so Joe's is gold and mine is grey.
Right, yeah. You're like, oh, these are new Iron Hand successor chapters.
Well, exactly. It's this is the Iron Hands when they're on parade in Joe's case, and they're the Iron Hands when they're I don't know, when they're down a mine. I don't know. I mean, to be fair, black would have served them perfectly reasonably in that set of circumstances. But yeah, I mean, Space Marines, isn't it? I mean, all my Space Marines are grey now. That's just the generic colour scheme I operate under, and then, you know, you just sort of tweak it accordingly. And obviously, if people have a massive issue with that, which they sometimes do with Space Marines, I'm sure it can be resolved in a relatively reasonable conversation. But if it needs to go to a successor chapter, then so be it. I don't know what I'd do about the 110-point Iron Hands character that I want to use, but is what it is. I'm fairly certain, and again, I might be wrong about this, the only other thing I need in the list is the relic for the Iron Hands, but I think there's a 1 CP stratagem that allows you to give an Iron Hand relic to a successor chapter anyway.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
So there's probably ways of wangling that. And then I might even do better, because then I can also add an additional trait to it, so I could add range to things or do something there. So maybe that might be a thing to look in as well. But from the off, the Iron Hands are bananas. That whole using the Devastator Doctrine, re-rolling ones, not suffering the penalties for moving and shooting, it makes Storm Talons mental, because Storm Talons have strafing runs, so they're hitting things with assault cannons and heavy bolters on 2+, re-rolling ones, which is bananas. It makes the Leviathan crazy, because he's ballistic skill 2+, and as he moves forwards and shoots, he's hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. Again, crazy. It makes Whirlwinds insanely good, because again, they're just re-rolling 1s natively, so you don't need to put captains or anything next to them, they just get it. And obviously they're in the Devastator Doctrine, so they add an additional minus AP to their shots. And it makes intercessors with Stalker rifles utterly bananas. I was dropping stuff left, right and centre with those Stalker rifles because of the 2 damage. I mean, you know, you get a cheeky wound off here and there with a Stalker rifle, it turns into 2 damage, and that's very, very meaningful in a lot of situations. Plus they're AP -3, which is so stupid. But anyway, there you go. I digress. Iron Hands, that's been fun. How about you, Phil? What have you been doing lately? You're off to No Retreat. We're going to talk about it later, right?
Yes, yeah, I'm off in under 12 hours, probably under 10 hours as well, so not long to go at all.
Brilliant.
And yeah, the dedication of being here, it's impeccable.
Well, exactly, mate, and that is why I applaud your efforts, and thank you greatly for having supported us, myself, yourself, us collectively across these 30 episodes. I think it's been awesome, man, that we've been able to do it. I appreciate this 30th episode lacks some of the, you know, contributors that we have come accustomed to having, but you know what, Phil, I'm well happy that we got this far, mate. I think, you know, ultimately this is what, a year and a bit we've been doing this. I think we started June 2018, and now obviously it's September 2019, so you know, going strong for a bit now. Really, really pleased with the response we've been getting. I know obviously this sort of stuff sounds really disingenuous or a little bit kind of conceited when it comes out of people doing these kind of things on, you know, podcasts or whatever it happens to be. But legitimately, I'm really happy with where we're at, and I think, you know, it's a testament to the hard work that yourself, myself, and even though we give him a lot of crap for it, Joe has put in over the last year and a bit. I think, you know, it's been really cool, and it's just been great because I think it's really brought us together more as friends and allowed us to do more things together, and it just did everything we set out to achieve with it, I think, in the sense that it's just made us think more about the hobby, being more invested and involved in the hobby, and I think it's been really great to share our enthusiasm for all this silly nonsense with people over the internet. So, you know, despite the fact he's not here, well done, Joe, on 30 episodes. You useless arse. Phil, any thoughts or feelings to add on that lovely sentiment?
I don't know. I mean, it's been really good fun. It's been great, especially meeting people at events or just bumping into people who are like, oh, I listened to your podcast, or, you know, oh, I recognise these miniatures on your Instagram, you so-and-so, and it's like, yes, yeah, I am. So that stuff's always been really great. Whenever we hear feedback from people, whenever our listeners sort of send us a message on Facebook or on Instagram, it's always really great to hear. Or even if it's just feedback and, you know, tell us what you don't like or what you'd like to hear more of, because we're always wanting to refine it, but quite often we don't necessarily know what our listeners want. So yeah, if anyone's ever got any feedback for us, just drop us a message on our Facebooks and Instagrams, which is Lookout Sir or Lookout Sir 40k. Yeah, I mean, it's been great. It's been kind of a lot of hard work, and a lot of our evenings every week now get taken up with doing the recording.
Mm-hmm.
But it is also nice, for us collectively as friends to have a bit of chit chat about the hobby.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of what we'd be doing anyway, but we're just being a bit more formalised in how we go about it.
Yeah, it has to be said, yeah. It's a bit more of a formal version of what we were doing anyway, but at the same time, yeah. I have to agree as well, it definitely is eating into evenings, which is fine though, I don't mind that, although I imagine my darling wife is finding it all the more frustrating as time goes on, but nonetheless, I think there's still a good level of fantastic understanding. She is a wonderful woman, so I'm very fortunate in that regard. I'm not saying these things because I know she can hear me saying them right now. Anyway, let's talk about what we're going to say on the show. Actually, just before we talk about what we're going to talk about in the show, what I will say again, and we said it last episode, obviously, if you can take it upon yourselves to share the Lookout Sir 40k podcast with your various friends. Myself, Phil, Joe, we're all really excited about the growth and expansion that we've been, able to achieve. And, it's not really all about the numbers for us. It really isn't. But at the same time, the opportunity to kind of push ourselves out there further and, be able to reach more people is always really exciting. So if you want to, why not try telling people about this wonderful podcast you listen to, assuming that's how you feel about us. Obviously, if you don't like us very much, I question how you even come to get this far into it. I mean, this has been a very rambling intro, even by our standards, and that's with just me and Phil. I mean, this is
and we've not even said what we're talking about yet either. We just went straight into the Iron Hands. That's like a mini bonus segment in itself.
Well, exactly. Well, I wanted to talk about the Iron Hand stuff, and we're not going to mention the salamanders or the Imperial Fist stuff that's coming along, even though they've got that Imperial Fist fellow with a knuckle duster on a power fist. I mean, that's a pretty incredible statement of intent, isn't it?
No, for sure. I mean, I actually really like that model. I think the head just looks a bit like one of those, was it Small Soldiers characters? But with the exception of that, I think the the model itself is really good. I think the sort of illustration of that model does the head kind of looks better on the illustration, even though he looks a bit gormless in it. But otherwise, I really like it.
Exactly. You can't have everything. I think we said he looked like Fisto from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, didn't we, on our social media channels? Because that's kind of how it's...
Because he's got a big fist.
He's got a big fist, yeah. Anyway, there you go. So what are we going to talk about in episode 30? It's going to be a relatively concise episode. We're going to talk about Psychic Awakening. As those of you who listen regularly will know, I quite like my Eldaria, Elder, Drakari fun stuff. And there's quite a lot of that coming along with Psychic Awakening. What would have been really sensible is if we had got Paulie on the episode to talk about that, but he, like Phil, is off to no retreat tomorrow. So, although I really, really want to get him on the podcast to talk about Drakari and all sorts of other fun stuff, seemingly we've not been able to because timing and all the other nonsense. But nonetheless, we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll close it out by talking about Phil's preparation plan and or enthusiasm for No Retreat to Come, which, if you're not already familiar, is a little tournament that takes place in the lovely land of Gibraltar, right, Phil?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it.
And it's organised by the good people of SM Battle Reports, and it is a pretty incredible exclusive, that's right, exclusive event for some of the finest, pillars of our hobby community, which, despite their better judgment, involves Phil these days, which is quite incredible, mate.
No, clearly I'm clearly doing something right because they think highly enough of me to invite me along.
Exactly.
And as I'll say later on, speculating on the future, the sort of painting standard of the people that get to attend, because you basically have to apply, is super high. So it's it's a bit of a privilege just to even get invited along in the first place. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it and looking forward to playing some good games against some really nicely painted armies. So it should be a good hobby all-rounder long weekend.
It's true, because normally Phil has to play against me, Joe, or Richie's armies, and they're not nearly painted to the same sort of standard as who he'll come up against next week or this weekend.
Yes, yeah, for sure. It's painted by sponges in comparison.
Well, exactly. I mean, you're not unfair for saying it, mate. It's totally fair. All right, brilliant. Well, with that being said, we'll move on now to the first segment of the show. Here we go. Woo! Hello, everybody. In this part of the podcast, we continue to be eluded by our companions, of which are absent due to general uselessness, I believe, is the technical terminology, right, Phil?
Yeah, I think they're just too busy having fun on our 30th anniversary episode.
I know.
That they're just not around.
It's quite an incredible feat for them to have achieved this, but nonetheless, so... Yeah, as was speculated within the intro, I'm pretty confident that this is all there will be throughout the entirety of the podcast. It's a me and Phil show. Woo! Maybe this is the better format, Phil. Maybe we should have just stuck with this from the outset.
No, I mean, we would have started the podcast about a year earlier.
We definitely would have done. But let's not go, besmirching Joe too much, even though he can't ever seem to stick to any arrangement he makes and... wasn't very good at social media.
No, that's true.
Well, I think that was true.
I mean, what did he say last episode? Like, there'd be was it an aunt or granny that's dying or something? That's his usual excuse.
It's true, actually. He had sort of, given us plenty of warning about the fact that he's not being very good. But what can we do? Anyway, we're going to talk about what little we know of the psychic awakening and speculate on all the fun stuff that's coming out of that. There seems to be an awful lot of Elder-related nonsense. No doubt because it's called The Phoenix Rises or something to that extent. Phoenix Awakening, Psychic Awakening, Phoenix Lords Rising, something along those lines is what they're calling it. So we've seen lots of new Eldery stuff and, rumours of what is to come in the future. We kicked off with the realisation that there is going to be plastic aspect warriors. And over the fullness of time, they've shown us some bits and pieces of that. They've then gone on to show us a rather lovely-looking plastic incubi, although I have to be honest, I'm not entirely sure I'm super keen on the Darth Maul two swords stuck together vibe that they've gone for there, but obviously you will be able to use those holding a sword in a more traditional manner. And then most recently... has been the unveiling of the Phoenix Lord Jane-Zar, the Silent Death, which is all quite exciting. So clearly quite a lot of Elder stuff is on the horizon. And I think you'll agree, Phil, that the Elder really needed some love and attention, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, not from a rules point of view. I think they're pretty solid in that respect. But yeah, the model range, some of it is really good. Some of it is still good, even if it's all in, fine cast or something, because a lot of those models are super old.
Yeah, I mean, the Phoenix Lord range is... it's incredible to see that Games Workshop are at last revisiting the Phoenix Lords, because I remember when I went to Games Day in 1999. What a time to be alive that was. I went to Games Day in 1999, and I remember going up on the old coach... up from Salisbury with the Games Workshop crew there. And there was a member of store staff who, back in 1999, based on the perspective of what would have then been, 15 years of age child, the words of a member of store staff were like gospel when it came to Warhammer 40,000 and or Warhammer 40,000 related accessories. And I remember that individual saying... that there's some weird contract or thing in place that they will never, quote, never revisit or resculpt the Phoenix Lords. So, blow me down with a feather, I think is a thing that some people say over here. The Phoenix Lords have come back, much to the dismay of Pat, the store staff man, who said those words, what will now have been 20 years ago. Isn't that exciting, Phil?
I know. Clearly, the second check for Jez Goodwin has finally cleared, and they're now allowed to make make them again.
Well, absolutely. That's it. He's been pitching for that bonus scheme for an awful long time, and he's been slaving away making new variants of Primara Space Marine, but he managed to find just a little bit of time to revisit. Although, to be fair, going back to a Jez Goodwin interview about his resculpts of some of his most famous characters, he is very much sticking to the old philosophy of we're keeping the same sort of hat and then putting it on a new sort of model, which is, quite inspiring to say the very least.
Well, in that new for the Phoenix Lord, they actually promoted it with a video that shows a bunch of his old concept sketches. So I don't really think that he's even had to do anything for these ones, because they have just taken that original artwork, which the old model is based on, and it is almost like for like. It's just a better sculpt of an old design.
Yeah.
Like, they haven't revolutionized it. They haven't radically made Jane's are different from the old model. They've just made it better, which is sort of perfect, really. Even the sort of pose is fundamentally the same, but they've just made it much more dynamic. They've done that classic Elder thing of, let's have them on a rock or floating in the air, attached to a bit of rock.
It's true.
Which is
true. It must be a terribly tedious business being some kind of elder, because it seems that the higher up you go in elder society, the more, airborne you need to be, or closely juxtapositioned, but next to a rock. It seems to be one of those unfortunate things that comes with seniority within the elder ranks. You have to be forever somewhere close by a rock, or have unnecessarily long hair that only really serves to, elevate your ability to remain, held in the sky, which is always quite good.
Yeah, I actually think that works really well. I sort of like the really long hair on the model, and it's a nice way of creating that illusion that she's jumping in the air without her actually, being stuck on a plastic piece of transparent rod, which is the sort of thing that they would have done in the past.
No, absolutely. One of the nice details as well with this kit or this model is the fact that the rock in question is also fashioned from a statue of an avatar, which is quite interesting as well, that it's kind of potentially representational of the fracture of Biltan, and maybe the whole kind of sequence where the Incarn was burst from the body of an avatar. Maybe it's a little bit of a nod to that piece of the story where the Incarn came to be, and she's now fighting over the broken remnants of the avatar that was.
Yeah, I'm sure you can read lots of meaning into it.
Almost certainly. But yeah, no, Jane's Arm is really cool to see come back. Obviously, it's exciting because it could potentially, and will obviously, herald the return of many other Aspect Warriors. The interesting thing is to begin to imagine how these Phoenix Lords, as opposed to Aspect Warriors, as I said earlier, how these Phoenix Lords will start to be returned to the game, because ultimately, it doesn't seem that they're just content with releasing a new miniature. They've also gone so far as to illustrate that there are going to be new rules for this new Jane Czar. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they then start to drip feed out the next, line of Aspect Warriors and their corresponding Phoenix Lords, because ultimately, in terms of the Phoenix Lords, I believe there is 6 of them. There's Jane Czar, the Silent Death, Cadendras, the Shadow Hunter, who is the Phoenix Lord of the Striking Scorpions, who I have to admit, given the artwork of the picture of Jane Czar versus Drazar from, or what we assume is Drazar, from the Drakari's Incubi temples, it would have kind of been cool if they had unveiled this as him fighting against Cadendras, because there is a lot of parallels and a lot of backstory about the fact that Cadendras is the second Phoenix Lord of the Scorpions, because the actual first Scorpion is potentially Drazar, or the founder of the Incubi temples within the Drakari world of Komarath and all this funny old Dark Elder Drakari nonsense. But that would have been quite nice to see that. But then I suppose it doesn't really have the same kind of parallels or the same kind of opposites as Banshees and Incubi. They're quite different opposing forces as opposed to Scorpions and Incubi, which are practically the same thing, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which is cool to see. But yeah, regardless, new rules. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you reckon, Phil? Do you think they'll just, start going, look, here's another one, and another one, and another one, until they're all done in a short succession? Or do you think we'll be hearing about new Phoenix Lords for the next 3 years?
I don't know. It's it's not quite the same as bringing back a Primarch where everyone speculated that there would be, potentially coming one a year or something, and they've sort of sensibly only done one so far. And maybe another will return at another point, but I'm kind of in no rush to have one. So with this, I think they'll either do a bunch of them all at once and just be like, here's a new range of them straight away, or maybe they will drip feed them. It's a bit hard to say, and it's like they've not really again clarified what this psychic awakening is. I get the feeling there's going to be at least several books, hopefully more than two than Vigilus. It'd be quite nice if it's a bit more of an ongoing one that sort of lasts a whole year potentially, and then there's like 4 or 5 books.
Yeah,
something.
No, totally agree.
And then they can go in detail. And it seems like the very first book's going to be Elder versus Drakari. Maybe Harlequins and Yunari will be squeezed in there as well. It'll be interesting. Like, they could be doing this first book, for example, might be a big focus on the sort of Eldari race, and a bit like there'll be just like a massive drop of models and rules. So if you don't have any of those models, it's like you probably won't pick up the book, but you might if you just want to read a story, because a bit like The Gathering Storm, there was the first one was Fall of Cadia, wasn't it? And then
Correct,
it was Fracture of Beltane, and then it was Gathering Storm. And again, that was done that way where it was very faction specific. So I ended up buying all of those books, and it's like I didn't need Fracture of Beltane. I don't have a huge interest in Elder, and I wasn't going to buy any of those models, but I still bought it for the ongoing storyline, and that is potentially how they can hook people into buying all the books even when they don't need the books. Whereas Vigilus was a bit more of a, here's literally a smattering of everything. Basically Chaos was in one book and literally everyone else was in the other one. And if they do dribs and drabs where it's like all my rules for, let's say, Guard get some new models and there's literally one new unit across 5 books, that'd be a massive pain. And I think maybe they're probably quite aware of that as well. Like, they don't want people to own and have to carry around multiple books if they're sensible. So if they've got their thinking man's hat on, all the Elder stuff will be in one book, and you'll be like, brilliant, all my releases come out at one time. That doesn't mean that they necessarily have all the Phoenix Lords, because they might just do 1 or 2 in this, but there's probably going to be a whole bunch of new units, or at the very least re-releases of new units. And it's a matter of, will they be updating those rules for them, or are their rules pretty solid so they don't actually need to do anything for them? Who knows?
Who can say? I think the thing is, Elder, or Eldari as we should probably say, are a wonderful way to begin any story, I suppose, because the fun thing about Eldari is they are alluded to or given the credibility of having far greater understanding of things than humanity. So the general consensus is Elder know what is going on in the broader sense. And the funny thing about Elder as well is they've created an interesting dynamic with the Elder where they only really communicate in nonsense. So from the perspective of a reader, they like to kind of proposition things in a very grand and terrifying scale, but never really tell you the details. So if I was to start a massive psychic awakening narrative, I think the place to begin is the Elder, because you can talk about the civil war going on within the webway between the Drakari and the Craftworld Eldari, and then ultimately have Farseers talking, in, as I said before, in these grandiose terms about the fate of the universe and the threat of chaos, and this prophesized vague terminology that gives you all a sense of foreboding and terrifying scale, while at the same time telling you nothing of what's going to come. So I think it's a very
and that's
good way.
Exactly what they've done, haven't they, with the, what's the name, the Yolku Shay, the visionary of Latok. With those little paragraphs. So it was interesting, like they started off the Psychic Awakening with the Inquisitor and doing a little bit there, and then they've completely sort of flipped it over to this, and it almost would have made sense that animation was predominantly about this visionary character doing the speech.
But I think as well, I think the Phoenix Rising stuff is a stopgap between this and the bigger thing. The bigger thing is going to be the Imperium. It's going to be one of those Dawn of War 2 trailer moments where it's some Marines fighting some Elder, and then they go, "Don't worry about us, look up there," and then it's like, "Oh God, Tyranids, wah!" So that kind of premise, I suppose, where we're going to just kind of get through this, have some cool new Eldari stuff, and then they'll go Black Templars and Orcs and and then it all gets very, very exciting, I'm sure. Not that I'm not excited about the new Eldari stuff, but let's be honest with ourselves. I think when it comes to the Eldari range, a few additions here and there is definitely a good thing, but I think the mainstay units are going to probably stay the way they are in terms of competitive play. But having played a lot of Iron Hands recently since the release of the Iron Hand book, I can tell you with a certain degree of certainty that the days of the Elder Flyer are coming to a conclusion, because, crikey, mate, if you've got a couple of Leviathans up against you from the Iron Hands, they are just going to rip through your Flywing Elder in no time whatsoever. There's very little you're going to be able to do to actually keep them at bay, because they are just devastating. But we'll see. That's a prophecy of something that may or may not happen. Who can say?
That's true.
Indeed. So what's your expectations or imaginings about how things will unfold, Phil? What do you suspect the Psychic Awakening has in store for us?
Oh, do you know what? I don't really have a huge clue. Like my original, when they talked about it, my original guess was that it was going to be some form of endless spells, because they talk about every existing faction except Death Coral Creek, every Astra Militarum are in there. So all of the kind of Codex factions are getting new rules. So my logic behind that was every one will get new psychic powers that will have physical models on the tabletop, in the same way that they've done it for Age of Sigma with endless spells, and that'd be a nice, easy release. But I think that potentially could still happen. I think they obviously bigging up the psychic part of it, the Psychic Awakening, just from its very name, it implies that each faction maybe gets a psychic model, like a psyker of some kind, or somehow ramp up the powers, ramp up the disciplines, maybe unlocking access to them. Who knows? But at the moment, it just looks like it's a vehicle for releasing models to existing armies without having to re-release the Codex.
Yeah.
Obviously, Space Marines got their kind of 2.0 Codex because the new release of the Vanguard Marines was massive. So that's why they did that. The Chaos got their kind of slightly poorer 2.0 re-release for a similar thing because they had a massive drop. Whereas for everyone else, I think they've done, they've been focusing a lot on Chaos and Marines for the last 2 years since 8th edition started. So this will hopefully be the way of all the Xenos races, especially them, getting some new units, or getting updates from, older sculpts. Like a lot of the, plastic Astra Militarum range is kind of old to an extent. Maybe they'll redo some of those models, or models that are in, if Games Workshop are sensible, they look at getting rid of their Finecast range of models and replacing them with plastic. And they have, to an extent, been doing that, but the rate that they've been doing it is super slow. To the point where a lot of armies...
slow. It's also quite impressively quick at the same time. They have consistently been releasing stuff every week, although they have had much more of a view towards the future. I think in terms of older existing ranges and sculpts, I can't think of too many old Finecast kits that have had new plastic releases for them, other than, bizarrely, the only ones that would be the ones that come to mind. I don't know. I don't know if any Space Marines after... because Sternguard and Vanguard came out a few years ago with the last Space Marine book for 7th edition, and then since then it's all been Primaris ever since. I'm probably wrong when I say this, but the last time I can think of a Finecast release, which was a unit, not a character, but a Finecast release that was a unit that got actually redone in plastic, bar these plastic aspect warriors, I'm going to say was the racks for the Drakari, which are the weird wibbly dudes with the hooks for hands. You know the ones I'm talking about? I think that might be the last one, but then I could be entirely wrong. I might be forgetting the most obvious, blatant ones, like the Sisters of Battle, for example, although they're not available yet. But
they were, even to this day, still metal, weren't they? They weren't ever in Finecast. So, technically by those rules.
I'm in the clear. I'm trying to think. I think maybe it was Rax. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what even really has a huge abundance of Finecast units, and the only thing that really comes to mind is Drakari and Craftworld Eldari. I think they're the only two now that really do.
I mean, mostly Finecast is the preserver sort of solo character models, and even like now, or within relatively recent memory, like the Inquisitor Eisenhorn model, like they still do Finecast models from time to time, even though it seems a bit puzzling that they wouldn't just do them in plastic. And they've always had their design philosophy has always been why redo an old sculpt that is pretty serviceable, and actually if you look at them painted up well, like God, those old minis can look good if you put a lot of effort into painting them up, but that does require doing a good paint job. So their logic has always been, why give you an old mini and redo it when we can give you a brand new mini that's got brand new rules, it's a brand new unit you've never seen before, brand new character. Isn't this exciting? Because most people actually, sadly, won't go, oh, my old, let's say, I mean, minus Calgar is a bad example because they primarily fight him, but it's very rare when people will actually go out and buy a replacement mini for one they already have. Yeah. Because quite a lot of times people love that mini. Maybe they put a lot of time and effort painting it up, or they've just played a lot of campaigns, or maybe they don't want the cost involved of rebuying a mini, because that's what it is. You're rebuying something if you already own it. Yep. So a lot of people will be like, "Oh no, I'm going to play with all these old minis. Why would I need these new ones?" Yeah. So I guess for them, maybe it's like not profitable quite often to re-release or redo old models. Yeah, I think now though, when it's almost like, it's a bit laughable sometimes when you look at these old Finecast models. Like if you come into the hobby now and be like, plastic minis, brilliant. Oh, these are great sculpts. Oh, wait, but I've got to have this really janky 20-year-old Finecast model for my hero to lead my warband. Yeah. That's a bit rubbish. Like if you look at it from that perspective, it's like, God, they do need to update them. No, and you can see here, like with Jane's are, like there's a good incentive to do it because they look fantastic, and technologies in plastic has improved, I think, in the last 5 years so much. Oh yeah, that it's now like more of a reason to do it as well. Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's the thing with the Jane's R model. I mean, obviously you can still use the old Jane's R model if you want to. I mean, again, it was funny when I saw the Jane's R plastic. I was very much like, oh, okay. And then I thought to myself, does that look better or worse than the old one? And then I immediately went to look at the old one. I was like, oh, God, I've clearly rose-tinted the ever-living bejeebus out of that. Because, yeah, good Lord, this is a much more beautiful model than the one that it predates. Which, interestingly, never actually came out in Finecast. I'm just going to throw that out and say that. Jane's R has always remained metal. There have only been, I think, of the various amounts of Phoenix Lord, of which I think there's 6, I think only 4 of them came out in Finecast. In fact, maybe only 3. I think it was Kandras, Morgan Ra, and a Sermon. Probably butchering the pronunciation of all of those that did Finecast. But Baharoth, Jane's R, and Fugan all remained in metal for some reason. Don't know entirely why, but it seems to be the way it went. Anyway, what would you like to see at the Phoenix Lords? Which one would you like to see next in plastic, if there was to be one in plastic? I mean, Kandras has always been my number one, so I'd love to see that one. I think the one that needs it the most is a Sermon.
I think Asurman is the granddaddy of all the aspect warriors, and he looks ridiculous at the moment in modern standards. I mean, don't get me wrong, for his time he was pretty cool, but as a he is the Phoenix Lord of Phoenix Lords, and he's just sort of a Dire Avenger with 2 shuriken catapults. And it's, I mean, it's still actually, in many regards, a pretty gorgeous model for, depending on paint job and other things. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, he really needs some attention. But I also think, as well, the thing about a sermon is again, pronunciation potentially wrong. He's a very sort of stoic and very, militant and very, disciplined character. So he'd be a really interesting juxtaposition to someone like this Jane Czar model, because where Jane Czar is this, agile, silent death, as she's called, this mad marauding, although marauding is probably not really an elegant enough phrase for how she goes about murdering people, but yeah, she's one of the most efficient and or graceful killing machines in the 41st millennia, whereas a sermon is this essentially, stoic tank character that just sort of, will mess you up in all sorts of different ways, but he does battle in a completely different way to Jane Czar. So I quite like the idea of that from a juxtaposition perspective, but I also like the idea of what they could potentially do with characters like Fugan, who is this, again, just sort of massive, tanky fire dragon. So the idea of him maybe being posed on some molten rocks with like some kind of like insane kind of fiery madness going on around him, because yeah, he's this super tough tank character, which would be super interesting as well. But anyway, yeah, so I don't know, I'd love to see, I mean, I just can't wait to see what they've done with the whole range, because if this is the beginnings of it, it's just an incredible thing. I already own all the Phoenix Lords. I will gladly, to Phil's point, I will gladly throw them all away and replace them with these new spangly plastic ones, because they are so lovely. Or at least I hope they will be, if they continue this trend. If I can go back as well, Phil, to what we were talking about in terms of our aspirations or thoughts around Psychic Awakening, I think maybe your interpretation of Psychic Awakening in terms of what you expected to see from it is understandably based on previous releases from GW, but also potentially just a little bit too literal. I think the Psychic Awakening could potentially actually have a very interesting narrative thread to it. I think it's entirely likely, and again, I don't think it's 100% possible, but I think when it comes to something like the Psychic Awakening, I think it could refer to something Empire-related or Emperor-related. There's been a lot of rumours and a lot of things doing the rounds about how the Emperor is transcending his physical form and heading, remanifesting himself in the warp as the Star Child, as it's supposed to be called. So potentially this could be the first, heartbeat or tremor of the existence of this new form of the Emperor, which would be an unbelievably exciting and interesting way to take the story, because I think that's always been the thing with the Emperor, is the idea. There's a lot of people that say that, he's a perpetual, and if he was to die, he would, immediately be reborn. And there's other people who say that he's actually, his psychic presence is such within the warp that it's starting to manifest himself as an actual god within the warp, in the same way as the Chaos Gods. So maybe that's that. Maybe that's what we're about to see. Maybe it's people becoming aware of the new Emperor forging himself in the within the warp as this new god of order or something.
Well, I definitely think there's you're right, I didn't say it, but I definitely think there will be a big narrative story around it. I was talking about it from very much this is what Games Workshop are doing to shift miniatures on a practical level. But it will be a campaign that will be a story that's going to move the 40k universe forward in time, and probably, like I said, do something new. I wouldn't be surprised if the Emperor, maybe they won't actually say outright, because Games Workshop don't like to do it, but they are teasing the Emperor as being a god at the moment, or at a very sort of like a one of the pantheon, but like a god of good rather than the kind of chaos entities. A lot of the books and the stories, like the fact that the Legion of the Damned aren't what I imagine they used to be as a kid, that they were just sort of these mysterious space marines that showed up, had a physical form. Now they're very much like spirits or like good demon entities that just manifest out of nowhere. And I've been listening to The Martyred Lady audio dramatization, and there's a great kind of conversation between sort of a custodian and Celestine, and sometimes between Celestine and Greyfax about, and there's also a Black Templar in there as well. So you've got these two different sides of people that believe the Emperor is God, and then people that believe that he was just a man of immense power, but not a god. And there's almost like more evidence now within that story and other stories that he does have divine powers, like the fact that Celestine can kind of die and come back to life, and she can do all these other amazing things, and it's all down to her faith. Or sometimes she says to Greyfax, like, regardless of whether it's the Emperor's will as a god or just some kind of psychic manifestation in the warp, it is something that's happening, and you can't deny that, whether you want to look at it from a logical point of view of science, whereas Celestine looks at it in faith. It's something that still happens. So yeah, maybe they're going to big up that. Maybe it's talking about the Emperor, or something maybe to do with Malcador, the Sigil, who I'm pretty sure he's dead, but he was the most powerful, potent psyker after the Emperor. So, and the sort of the psychic awakening symbol looks very similar to the Malcador, the Sigillets, his symbol as well. So it could be to do with, maybe it's a new psychic order within the Imperium, similar to Sisters of Silence, but like the opposite.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's, not the astronaut. There is a psychic order already, but maybe it's something else, something souped up. So who knows?
Malcador the Sigilite is coming back, and he's going to be a miniature, surrounded in all sorts of swirly psychic energy, doing all sorts of mad stuff. That would be cool. Yeah,
I mean, if we called it there on that guess, I'd be pretty amazed.
There you go. You heard it here first, everybody. Guaranteed to happen. So says myself and Phil.
It won't happen, but it'd be pretty amazing if it did.
Absolutely. But I mean, again, Games Workshop continues to, with the 8th edition of 40k, come up with new interesting elements that go in lots of interesting directions that, offer us as players lots of exciting twists and turns that we've never been able to sort of consider or imagine before. And I think this is definitely the good aspect of their decision to move away from the old setting of 40k and actually take the narrative forwards. And though I think there's been certain decisions along the way that have been quite clunky and probably not as elegant as I would have liked them to be, I still think that overall, on the whole, this is a really interesting series of decisions that have been made by these guys. And I think ultimately, I just like the idea of the potential possibilities. I think, anything that starts to introduce new, interesting stuff is really, really cool. And yeah, I'm very excited to see what's around the corner for the Psychic Awakening. I can't wait to discover more, I suppose.
I know, yeah, I'm sort of itching just to find out more. Like, they've been teasing us for quite a while now. It's like, just give me a book or tell me what it's going to be, so I can. I just really want to know what the story is going to be about, even if it's just the initial narrative elements. To be like, oh, that's great, that's awesome. We can start playing a campaign based around it or something. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. They know how to keep us interested, which is always good. How to continue to, take money from us, which is, I suppose, what they're there to do.
No, for sure.
So with that said, I imagine that's as much as we need to say on the Psychic Awakening. We'll move on now to whatever it is that comes next. Thank you. Woo!
So I'd like to say thank you for listening to 30 episodes of us and me and we and the peoples that come on. I've been told it's all about the rambling. What gets you going, because people loves it, and we will continue to ramble about pointless stuff like Ed and Eddie and WWE and random TV shows from the 70s and 80s, and how there's lots of different types of Caesars, including dog variety, salad variety, dog food variety, people variety, places variety, casinos variety, and we're going to keep that going. And there's going to be more sad stories about my childhood, and then we'll continue to talk about how just like unenthusiastic Phil can make things sound like when you're saying, "Wasn't that good, Phil?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's not Krieg though, is it?" And then like he's like Carl Pilkington in a way. Maybe that should be his new name. We'll get him a T-shirt. We'll shave his head, shave his beard off. Make him look like a tennis ball. That would be great. And then I suppose in this analogy, then that kind of makes Dan, the other fella, that guy, Ricky Gervais. Yeah, that'd be him, because he likes to talk a lot and he's got a weird laugh. And yeah, and it'd be great. So come along for another 30.
Now, in this moment of the podcast, we're going to talk to Phil about his weekend presently being within the confines of SN Battle Report's No Retreat, which I believe takes place in a faraway land not of this country itself. Where is it again, Phil, that this all happens?
It's in a lovely place called Gibraltar.
Oh, the place to be. And is Gibraltar rumoured to be a sunny day today?
I believe so, and much sunnier than it is currently in England, where it's pouring down with rain.
Exactly. It's relatively miserable by all accounts. So, SN Battle Reports, a relatively well-known enterprise that is in the, process of delivering and developing their own little battle reports on a regular basis, play host to the No Retreat event, which is effectively an invitational or an application-based event, correct, Phil?
Yeah, a bit of both. You've got to apply, so you've got to take some photos of your army, say who you are, and sort of give a bit of not a speech, so to speak, but you got to tell them who you are and what you do to the hobby, because they sort of like people that kind of contribute to the hobby as a whole. And then I think there's 42 people that made the cuts this year, and that was probably out of like 100, 150 applicants. So, yeah, reasonably high standard to get in. Like, the painting quality of a lot of the armies is just insane. Like, I'm in a sort of special No Retreat 8 WhatsApp group that they put you in, so you can chat to the other players that are
you allowed to talk about that, Phil? Is that not like one of the rules of engagement, that you should not talk about these special groups?
No, I'm sure it's allowed. Yeah,
fair enough.
It's sort of part of the package that they do for you, like Steve Pardo and the rest of the gang that put on the No Retreat event. Like, it is all like sort of not, I wouldn't say fully catered, because that's talking about food, but the whole event is very much catered and put on for you, and they do a really good job of looking after you. Like, so they put you in a WhatsApp group for you to chat with everyone beforehand, and everyone's like sharing photos of the armies, and they're sort of work in progress, because most people either sort of add to an army that already exists, which is sort of what I've done. Some people, like Nick Goddard, I think has pretty much been creating a brand new army from scratch. So he's been in Steeler Cult for the last year, pretty much since his application. So I think he had a few units already painted up by the time he did the application, and then his goal and focus and sort of motivation was to once he was got in was to build up his Gene Stealer cult army. So a lot of people are just doing a whole brand new army for this, which is quite impressive in itself.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds incredibly cool. I mean, that's one of the cool things, I suppose, about the event. Not having been myself, although maybe one day, I believe applications will probably open up immediately after this event concludes. Is that generally the case? Although we probably don't know, do we?
It tends to be like maybe a few weeks or a month afterwards, I think. I'm just trying to think last time. So looking at the old one for No Retreat 8, the application deadline was the start of December, and they probably have like a 2-month window. So yeah, October, November, and the start of December. So yeah, it will probably be a few weeks after the event. I imagine they'd be doing No Retreat 9.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? Maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to go along next year. But, notwithstanding that whole scenario, so you apply, you send in your application. So your application essentially contains information about your contribution to the hobby, what you play, what you collect, and I guess you send, like, some supporting imagery of the armies that you have or the models that you've produced. Is that broadly correct?
Yeah, normally it's like 5 really good kind of quality photos. I tend to do a mixture of like a couple of army shots, like sort of long shots of a whole group of models, and then a couple of close-ups of individual models, so they can see like the detail in the painting, just to get an idea of what your actual painting standard is. Because sometimes models are great from a distance, but then not so good up close. So it's always good to do a bit of a mix of both, basically.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then, effectively, you put in the application, and then you are informed via some kind of ritual ceremony of sorts. Isn't that broadly correct?
Yeah, so normally in fact, not normally, always, they send out a small wooden box that contains a few goodies in it, which is your invitation, basically. So it's a box that comes with a couple of dice, like their special SN battle reports dice, and I think one of them is always the I've seized or I've stolen. So on every side, it's like I have not. No, I think on most sides bar one is the SN logo, and then it says I stole on one face, which is obviously the 6.
Nice.
So yeah, they give you some dice. There's like a little scroll, which is like, congratulations, you've got in. And then there's a couple of sweets always thrown in, which is always like the best bit, I find. So the box is nice in itself. So it's nice, sort of like, I don't know, like a plywood box, which I pimped out this time because I knew I wanted to do a special inquisitional force for my Death Corps of Krieg, which is the army I was sort of applying with. So I did like a little Inquisitor symbol, so the little eye, tri-barred eye. I stenciled that on with some masking tape and an airbrush. So I sort of stenciled that on, and then I used some wood varnish and stuff to sort of make it all look fancy and stain the box to look a bit older than it really is. And so I'm going to use that just to like carry around my counters and stuff for the weekend, which will be nice.
Very nice, yeah. And are you, and I don't know if we didn't establish this already, you are assigned your army, correct, based on your application?
Pretty much. Well, or when you apply, you say what your army is, although you can actually apply for several armies, so I think it's up to 3. And because what they want to do is they want to make sure every single faction is represented. So literally one of everything. And they tend to also do like the major Space Marine chapters as well. I think this year there's 3 Astra Militarum armies. Weirdly, there's 2 Death Corps of Kriegs. Because what you tend to happen is there tends to be a couple of dropouts due to, family or whatever reason that people can't attend. So there's always like a reserve list of people that come in. So our good friend and regular listener to the show, Toke, is coming along. So I'll be getting to meet him. And he also has a Death Corps of Krieg army, so there'll be two of us representing.
It's cool,
which
man.
is quite cool.
Yeah, it'd be nice to meet the fella. I appreciate the relative irony of the scenario being that by now, or at least by now in the future sense, you will already have met with him, and who knows, maybe he will have listened to this at the point and feel all warm and excited by the fact that we are or at least you are excited to meet him in this particular instance, which is a good thing because it's always nice to catch up with people who you've had a lot of kind of communications with over the various social media platforms and other things. So, and that's got to be one of the nice elements of it, I suppose, especially with like the WhatsApp groups and the other thing. There must be a lot of anticipation building with those guys and lots of general kind of enthusiasm coming out of, or leading up to things to come. So I think that's definitely seems to add a lot of interesting elements to the overall event, with that kind of build and everything else that goes into it. Is very exciting.
Yeah, it is really good. I mean, there's lots of people that I've either... so there's some people that I met at the last one because I did No Retreat 6. I sadly got to miss out on No Retreat 7. So there's several people from No Retreat 6 that is going to be at this one. And then there's also people I've just met at sort of Warhammer World events in general, or people that I know via Instagram that I sort of know that are coming to be there. Obviously, Winter's SEO, he's going to be there, and I met him a few weeks ago, which we talked about, I think, the last podcast. So, it'd be nice to get to know people. So I imagine there's probably, 10 or so people there that are either know or at least recognise. And then I'm sure there's a bunch of people, because it is international, right? They do try and get people from all around the world. The UK is obviously their largest sort of sample of people. There's always about 15 or 20 of us from the UK, and the rest all come all the way around from around the world. There was a great guy called James that I met at the last one. He came all the way from America. I think he was like the only American. So that's like a long old trek to come over, but he absolutely loved it.
And based on your experience, there's still a competitive element to the whole thing. It is still fundamentally a tournament, right? Or is it much more kind of narrative focused? How do they tend to, because it strikes me that they're not really encouraging hyper competitive play, but as I understand it, some people, it's not frowned upon, or rather at least not allowed for you to come along and bring something more try hard, shall we say.
Yeah, so the event is the name of the event is No Retreat. The idea is it's a bit of a sort of holiday as well as gaming. Obviously, the focus is around the sort of 5-game, 2-day event. But it's kind of comped in a way where it's meant to be a bit more narrative and a bit more friendly and casual. That doesn't mean people don't try and win it. So their format is you basically have a faction that is your main faction. There's only 2 detachments you can take. Every faction, one of those detachments basically has to be battalion or brigade. And the other one can be like one of the others. So I don't think you can do double brigade or double battalion, for example. But that second detachment can be effectively an ally, which is like a custom list. So, for example, if you're Astra Militarum, you could take a Knight detachment or an Inquisition detachment or an Assassin detachment, or I don't think you can take Space Marines as a detachment. But yeah, it's sort of relative. What you would almost expect the old Allies matrix to be is predominantly what you can take. So so I've got my main detachment is my Astra Militarum, my Difficult Krieg, and then I'm taking some Inquisition as well. And then for that, I can still pay the 2 CPs to get an Assassin on top, which is quite themed for my list because the Assassins go really well with the Inquisition. But it does sort of mean I'm sort of taking a triple faction, but it's sort of all themed together.
No, absolutely.
And everyone does that. I think this time, looking at the armies, there's a lot more Knights being taken as the secondary detachment than ever before. Normally, you tended to get a couple of Knight-specific factions, which there is again this time. But so many more people are taking Knights this time. So I think they're going to tweak it even more to be basically monofaction. Because they also do the SNGTs, which they now do. Because it used to be... No Retreat used to be twice a year. It's now once a year with the DT taking place of the other No Retreat event. So that, I think, is mono-faction. So it literally is you can only take one faction with no allies, which I think would then limit the amount of, Knight players there be, because you can only take them as a main faction. So I think that's their intention for the next one. They sort of alluded to that in the chat. And yeah, it's definitely a lot more nights being taken this time than normal. There are people that do go and they want to win it. And, you know, people like Lawrence was famous for, I think he won like maybe 4 of them in the past. So he's been to quite a lot. He's not coming to this one. And yeah, so some people do go specifically to win or to have a good time and also to win as well. I think majority of people go with, no one wants to be, you know, no one wants to sort of roll over and get steamrolled. So you want to take a competitive list within reason, but you don't want to be that person that's, I don't know, taking triple riptides or something. And although I think someone might have done that, so, you know, that'd be interesting.
Well, exactly. I think that's always the interesting thing, though, with those. And I've met, as obviously you alluded to, a number of players that I've spoken to at Warhammer World and other places where they're very keen on the no retreat system, and they kind of hold it up as this gold standard in, you know, tournament weekender, because it delivers a much more kind of, you know, balanced and interesting scenario for everyone to play within. And I think I can totally understand how and why they've kind of developed that reputation, but also why they've elected to try and control the input or control the standards of the attendees, because I think, you know, ultimately it works to their benefit, right? Because they ensure that they deliver a generally very, very high standard of event, which is definitely something that people are really keen and looking out for and wanting to experience. So yeah, I think, you know, ultimately, you know, if any of you listening to this right now are interested in exploring, and maybe you didn't necessarily really know the details or the depth that, you know, this event goes into, if you think you yourself can be considered some kind of, you know, hobby aficionado who has an incredibly high standard of painting and other things, who fancies a weekend away playing games in a relatively warmer climate, then yeah, I would recommend following all the SM Battle Report relevant social media and things, and looking out for your opportunity to apply for what will be next year's No Retreat. And, you know, I myself am definitely going to throw in an application, because I regrettably missed my application window by all of a day for the one that Phil is going to now. But yeah, hopefully this next time around, myself and Phil will be able to travel across. Although, knowing my luck, I might get in and then Phil won't, or vice versa. Who knows? Who can say with any certainty?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting way. So the only way to sort of guarantee coming back is if you, I think, either you win the event or you win the SN award. Now that's basically, so there's a best army, which might also get you back, which is voted on by all the players in a kind of typical best army award. But then there's the SN award, which is awarded by the guys that run it, so the SN team, and they pick 5 armies in addition to, obviously, so I guess excluding the best army one, I'd assume. So 5 extra people, they win an award, and then they get kind of guaranteed entry to the next one. So I won the SN award, or one of the SN awards, at No Retreat 6, but then couldn't attend No Retreat 7, and it didn't roll over to No Retreat 8, so I had to like reapply again.
There you go.
So that's the only way you could get back. So maybe I'll come back victorious and having won something, but knowing the standard that, having seen some of the the models that are out there already, I would struggle, I think, because there are some that are just crazily good, crazily well painted, and yeah, really thematic. And I have to say also one additional thing, it's like the thing that the SN No Retreat is known for is their tables. Like each one is got like custom terrain on a different sort of style mat. It's all really well painted, and quite often it's like bespoke terrain as well. So every time you're playing, it's on a different board, looks totally different. Like there's a sort of Necron tomb world, there's like an Elder world, there's a sort of, there used to be like a crashed Battlefleet Gothic sort of ship, although I think they might have removed that one this year because it wasn't necessarily good in terms of game wise, in terms of, because it was just like super big chunks of terrain blocking movement and stuff. So they're always improving things and always trying to optimize the tables for playability, but still keep that balance of they look all really good, but each one is also different. They've also got a custom mission pack, and it uses, I believe it's like sort of more ETC format where you do Eternal War mission plus a Maelstrom mission, and you also do the tertiary missions such as First Strike, Slay the Warlord, Linebreaker. So you can basically win at 3 things. So the Maelstrom mission objectives are separate from the Eternal War mission objectives, and they don't all add together. They're like 3 separate pots. So you could win the primary objective, which is the Eternal War mission, but then you could lose the secondary and the tertiary, and potentially that would actually mean you lost overall because those 2 added together are worth more than the primary. There's like a sort of weird system in terms of how that works. So I haven't played that in a while, so it'll be quite interesting to give it a go. But it is always quite fun because it means if you get a bad matchup and you go, oh right, there's no chance I'm going to win the primary mission, it's I can still play for Maelstrom and go for the tertiary objectives as well, and potentially win it that way instead. So it's a really good sort of interesting format.
No, it sounds great, man. I mean, that kind of format is relatively commonplace, obviously, and I think, it'll be definitely an entertaining weekend for you. So, with that in mind, Phil, I mean, to an extent, we kind of spoke about the list in its core principles when we were talking about your GT Heat 2 list, but what's different this time around? What have you added? What are you kind of bringing special? What fancy things have you manufactured for this specifically? And how's that whole process of putting all this together been for you so far?
Yeah, so it's very similar to the GT list because originally the GT list was going to be the no retreat list, but I didn't get everything painted in time. And there's also some more restrictions because obviously there's only 2 detachments now, so I can't do the most optimized build. I'll talk you through it, and then I'll sort of talk about the pros and cons of it because it's not the most ideal list, but I really wanted to get a good balance of power and narrative in there without going super cheesy or super fluffy where to the point where I'm not going to win any matches. So I've got the first detachment is a battalion. For the HQ, I've got the Death Corps, Death Rider Squadron Commander, so the horseback. He's got demo charges this time, which was just like a nice addition, hotshot las pistol and a power sword. The plan is, I don't have to list it at the moment, but I'll probably pay an extra CP to gain an extra relic, of which I'll give him the Sword of Conquest, which hit and miss, but in most games, if I can get him in combat, that actually does really well, because it's +2 strength, -4 AP, D3 damage. So it's like a souped up lance, basically, that works every turn in combat.
It makes sense though, right? Because again, I think the core function of what that character performs is that he is charging headlong in with the other Death Riders to essentially get stuck in and fight your enemies. And the thing is, a lot of the time, that when you don't take that relic, he gets stuck in but doesn't really have a dramatic impact, whereas with the addition of that relic, it transforms him from a relatively mediocre combat character to quite a devastating combat character, and I think that shift means a lot with this army, because being able to have a character that can theoretically run into a unit of, say, Primaris Marines and conveniently kill 2 to 3 Primaris Marines comfortably is a big change, especially with the amount of, admittedly you're not going to see an increased amount of Marine players at no retreat because of the way it's structured, but you're obviously going to see an increase of power level within those Primaris armies. So having something like that can hurl himself into those and actually make meaningful damage to those units is going to pay dividends for you in the long term, I would imagine.
Yeah, for sure. And also, no retreat do a sort of strict WYSIWYG type of policy. So the model that I have is armed with a power sword, so it's like I kind of have to give it him rather than the hunting lance. And it's also just a good way, because I did it predominantly because, one, the model broke and the arm snapped off.
Yeah.
Or the hand anyway, and then the other one was actually, it was a good excuse I had a sort of pre-painted power sword going spare, because I'd sort of end up painting up all the equipment, so I just swapped that in, and it's a good way of representing him as the commander because there is no model. So just that simple addition is like clearly identifiable who he is and what he's armed with. So that's why I've got him armed with power sword. Then the other two HQ choices, I've got my double tank commanders. So pretty much the same as before. I've got them in the Emperor's Fist Vigilist detachment. I've got one with a las cannon on the hull, with the Relic Emperor's Fist Hammer of Thunderance battle cannon, which does flat 3 damage, along with a pintle-mounted Stormbolter, because that's using like my custom kit that I've made. So it's like a slightly smaller barrel, which is an easy way to identify him apart away from the other tanks that I've got. Basically, and then the other one is the kind of other classic one that I seem to go for, which is the heavy bolter on the hull, heavy stubber pintle mount, plasma sponsons, and a Punisher Gatling cannon.
Strong.
Yeah, so one of the options I had early on was going for a brigade, because I wanted more orders in there for actual troops, and that's the one thing I'm lacking. I only have the Death Rider sort of squadron commander who can give orders, so I haven't really got the ability to do things like move on any of my troops, which is a bit of a hindrance. But actually the tank commanders do a lot of work for me, and I found that at the GT that they're actually just really good, to the point where not having them in my list is really detrimental, because there's so many like minus to hit modifiers, and the fact that they have BS3 just gives them that extra ability to sort of push through anything that has that kind of thing on them. So I basically went for the less CPs, because obviously Brigade would have been great, but it was just a bit too much of a squeeze to try and fit what I wanted into that list. So I was like, I'll just go for this instead. So in terms of troops, I've got 4 infantry squads. 2 of them are just completely standard. 2 of them have a plasma gun specialist in there, again just because I sort of had the points going spare, and it gives them a little bit of bit of bite to the 2 that will be slightly further back, so hopefully they won't get shot at first. And this is where I deviate slightly in my elites. So I've got quite a lot in here. So I've got an Astropath. Now in the GT heat I did an Astropath, and I took Night Shroud because the -1 to hit on the Shadow Sword was insanely good. But I don't have a Shadow Sword here, so I sort of figured that would be a bit pointless. I did think about taking Night Shroud and comboing it with one of the tank commanders, because if I pop smoke on one of them, it'd be -2 to hit, which would be super cool. But I was like, no, what I'll do is I'll do Psychic Barrier instead, so that gives you +1 to your save, which will combo really well with my next unit, which is my Crusaders. So this is the new unit that I've been painting up. So a squad of 4 Crusaders, all armed with power swords. They've got 4-up save normally, a 3-up invulnerable save, but with Psychic Barrier that becomes a 2-up. So I was like, oh, this will be quite good. Just a unit that can try and tank some shots. But they're still quite squishy, so they would probably still die to bolter fire quite easily, because even with a 2-up save, you're still going to roll some 1s. You
had some interesting, because you've used like a conversion from Sisters of Silence with like Skitarii helmets, correct?
Yeah, so it's the Sisters of Silence with the swords, like sort of double-handed swords. They look really cool, and it's Skitarii Vanguard heads.
And you had a bit of a funny 5 minutes, didn't you? Because you had sought permission for these prior to building and painting them, and then upon revision, you were almost told that you hadn't quite given them a big enough shield. Wasn't that correct?
Yeah, so whenever you do conversions, like they always say, I'll run it past us first of all. So I did at the kind of, once I'd finished building the models, I showed one of them to Pardo and was like, are these okay for Crusaders? And he was like, yeah, they look cool. And then once I'd sort of almost painted them up, I was like, oh, Actually, I decided I want to run 4 of them as Crusaders, but one of them is Godfrey de Montbard, who's the Crusader from Blackstone Fortress.
Yeah.
Just because he's got some, like, he's got his abilities basically does 4 attacks, 4 wounds, but on a roll to 6 to hit, he does 2 hits instead of 1. So I was like, oh, actually, taking him as my sort of leader for my Crusaders would look really well. And the conversion for the, effectively, my squad leader for the Crusaders looks very similar to that model because I've got it in a similar pose where he's got the sword sort of, he's holding it in literally the exact same way, but instead of holding the shield, she's, because it's actually a woman, she's holding her Scutari helmet.
Yeah.
And then I've got it was a Stormcast Eternal head from it was the Forge World Stormcast Eternal female upgrade kit. So I've got that as the head. So I was like, oh, I'll just run that past him. And he was like, okay, just show me a photo. And I did. I showed him basically both of them. So I showed him the Blackstone Fortress one, and then the model that I've made, and he was like, oh, you don't have a shield on your one? And I was like, oh, I do. Like, it's just that small one on the shoulder, because I've gone for these, the Cataphracti Terminators, the plastic Horus Heresy ones. They've got small storm shields. So I've gone for that. So the idea is, rather than having these giant, bulky, physical shields, they're basically much more sort of basically a barrier, like, you know, psychic barrier or something. That
some sort of force field, essentially.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And he was like, oh, like, I'd prefer it if they were a bit bigger. And I was like, oh, but you okayed it earlier when I'd run it past you several months ago. And he was like, oh, crap, like, I forgot that they had these big giant storm shields on them. So he sort of had to think about it, but was like, okay, no, just carry on and, you know, do it.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, thank God.
I mean, there's no doubt in my mind when I look at those miniatures, and if anyone listening along would like to also take a look at those miniatures, you can see them on Phil's Beyond the Tabletop Instagram and or other social media platforms that Beyond the Tabletop resides within. It's fairly evident what they are. You know, that simple conversion with the Scutari helmet and everything else that kind of goes into them, there would be no doubt in my mind, or there would be no complexity to me understanding and remembering that is a unit of Crusaders. So I would not foresee that being an issue, but then at the same time, it's good that you've clarified that and have that all approved and thumbed up and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think I sort of put extra effort into painting the shields up, so I've done some freehand work on them to sort of draw attention to them, so they're a bit more obvious than otherwise they could have been, depending on how I was going to paint them up. But yeah, so I've got those 2 squads. In a way, it's better if I just take them as one big squad of 5, because of the new Acts of Faith. So the Acts of Faith obviously work on 1 squad, and along with the psychic barrier, like, that will work on the squad of 4. But if I had them all as 5, it would potentially be easier.
Yeah.
But I figure this way it just adds a bit more character and sort of flavour by having one of them as a character.
Yeah.
So they should, in theory, have a 2-up invulnerable save, and then with Acts of Faith, basically I start the game with 3 Acts of Faith points, and then there's a bunch of stuff I can do. One of them is on a 3-up. I think it's the start of the movement phase. So basically I have to spend 1 point, and then if I can roll a 3-up, I can regain one of my lost Crusaders. So that's a good way of potentially keeping that squad alive for as long as possible. The best one, though, is on a 5+ at the start of the combat phase, you can attack twice with that squad, or you can select them to attack twice, to activate twice, is where it words. So if you can get the charge off, you can roll a 5-up, which admittedly is a 1 in 3 chance, so not very high. But if you can pull it off, you can attack twice, and in theory, because you charged, you can activate them twice first before your opponent gets to hit you back.
Wow!
And they also combo with my other unit, which is my Ministorum Priest, because that will give them or anyone within 6 inches of him +1 to attack. So the Crusaders have 2 attacks by default, and then it becomes 3. And then potentially they could all attack twice if I can pull off that act of faith, basically.
Yeah, amazing. And you weren't tempted at all to actually use the proper Crusader model? You were just worried that it might have created too much of a comparison point to what yours looked like versus what the character model actually is?
Well, partly I don't have the box sets.
Well, that'd be one element.
As much as I would love it, it's quite expensive for just those models, because I'm not that interested in the cultists. So yeah, I mean, it is a lovely model, but it's like I actually prefer the look of my ones, and I've kind of gone down that route now. So I wouldn't want to do it to confuse. But it was just purely the fact that the pose of one of my models looks exactly like the pose of that character was why I was like, oh, I want to run that as a swap out. And it was also this bizarre thing of I couldn't ever get my army to be at 1750 points. I was always like 10 points shy, and I literally had nothing to spend it on.
Yeah.
But actually, by dropping one Crusader and then adding him in, sort of created this perfect balance of points in the army. So I liked the idea of that.
It was destiny, mate. It was destiny all along to have
exactly.
him in there.
Yeah. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, you find that a lot of the time with some of these obscure Blackstone Fortress characters that, yeah, often if you find yourself in one of those bizarre scenarios where you don't have anything in your head that can fulfill that 15, 12, however many point hole it is in your army, there's usually a Blackstone Fortress character out there for that. They do seem to work well in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I said, it would probably work better just having it as a squad of 5 because of the combos for the attacking twice and the psychic barrier and stuff. Just would work a bit better. But I like the idea that it's character.
Yeah,
I think it'll work really well. So the other units, because I've got a couple more elite units. Yep. So I've got the Death Corps Commissar, who I'm running as my warlord. And again, this was almost I wanted a unit to babysit my tanks to take the old Grudges warlord trait. I sort of ummed and ahed with this, whether to make my warlord the Death Rider squadron commander, who would be sort of more thematically a better option, but at the same time, he's a character that tends to die by turn 2 or 3, so it's like, why would I just sort of give away that easy victory point?
Yep.
So that was a bit of I was trying to game it a little bit in terms of it. Also, I didn't have an officer to give to make it. So that is what I would normally do. But then the officer, if I did have him, I would want to be running up the board with some other things. You know, I could have given him voice of command, so actually my commissar does do orders. That was one of my other options. But I was like, no, I'll stick with old Grudges because that does combo really well with the tank commanders. And then I've got the Death Rider command squad, which is 4 horses basically, and allows the Death Riders to all out flank.
How are you getting all these elite choices into your army?
Well, there's interestingly the Crusaders and so firstly I can because a battalion can actually take like 6 elites. It's something crazy. I'm pretty sure. I remember checking that this, because it didn't cause an error in Battlescribe, and then I looked it up. You can take more elites than any of the heavy support slots.
Okay.
But also, there's a special rule now for Crusaders, because the Crusaders now use the Sisters of Battle beta rules.
Oh, crikey, you're totally right about that. 0 to 6 elites in a battalion.
Yeah.
I had no idea of that. I've been working on the assertion that it's only 3.
Yeah, so I could technically take them because of that, but also there's a new rule within the Crusaders, which is if you have a Ministorum priest, although I think it's like a keyworded as a kind of Ministorum priest character, they don't count towards your slots.
Oh wow, okay.
Which was in a way it was good for this one, but it was a real hindrance for me wanting to take a brigade because it's like I need 3 elites to fill up the brigade, but the Crusaders don't count. So I was like, so then I need to take another unit to fill it up, and actually that was more of a hindrance than a benefit. So That was an interesting one, and I was almost like, could I take technically auxiliary detachment of one minister and priest, and then in that detachment of one, take my crusaders, because the crusaders technically don't count.
Yeah.
Like, is that legal, or is that an illegal use of the rule? Like, because it's such a weirdly worded. I mean, I assume you could, because
I assume you could as well. At the end of the day, if you took a solo auxiliary detachment, or whatever it's called, the one-man detachment, and then you were to take, say, Marnius Calgar states that if you take Marnius Calgar in a detachment, you get Victrix Honor Guard for free. Although I think he has to be a warlord, and you don't get them for free. They just don't take up a slot. So by the same thing, I would be like, well, yeah, of course you can have Calgar and some Victrix Honor Guard if that's what you've done. It's just, so by the same extension, I would say that, yeah, you could take a Mistborn Priest and then some Crusaders in. But again, why you'd choose to do that, I don't know, but maybe it's an interesting way of squeezing them into your army list in a creative way if you want to use them, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to play them, like, because I sort of want them as like a super durable screen for my Inquisitor, to try and keep her alive a bit longer.
No, it makes sense, mate.
So it'd be interesting to see, because the thing is, like, the power swords are great, -3 AP, brilliant. Still only 1 damage, okay. But the fact that they're still strength 3 and there's no strength bonuses to them, it's like, okay, what are you going to actually be killing with them that is super high armored, but has no toughness at all? It's like, unless there's some souped up, I don't know.
Sisters of Battle.
Yeah, Scissors of Battle. Yeah, they're literally like the prime target for killing with them, because you need something to be toughness 3, but with like a 2 or 3 up save.
Yeah.
Which just doesn't exist in the game, I don't think. It's like you're pretty much always going to be up against something that's toughness 4 or more.
That being said, Fire Warriors won't like you very much, but then you're not going to much enjoy charging into them, so it's sort of, much of a muchness at that point. But Fire Warriors, most Elder Aspect Warriors as well. So Striking Scorpions, Dark Reapers, Warp Spiders, they're all toughness 3 with a 3 up save. Fire Dragons, they're toughness 3 with a 3 up save. So, yeah, lots of Aspect Warriors.
Lots of Elder, basically.
Yeah, lots of Elder. Incubi, depending on how you pronounce or decide that that's said. But, yeah, those guys could definitely be an option. But, yeah, I mean, no one's objectively, I say this objectively, but no one's really playing those options presently. Psychic Awakening notwithstanding, currently Aspect Warriors are not, a very regular feature in most people's armies. So, yeah. But still, man, I mean, it's just an interesting unit, isn't it? And it'll be interesting to see what they do for you. And I think that's one of the things I'm most interested in hearing about when you come back from this is, what kind of things did they unlock for you? And if I think more than anything, just having a durable unit that you can put on things as a guard player and have a certain degree of certainty that they're not going to just get completely melted is a big plus for you, right?
Yeah, because I was thinking about, like, you can take them up to 10 men squads, and the fact that when you do that, it unlocks a couple more faith points for you. And the fact that you can, on a free up, recycle 1 extra model a turn makes that squad pretty resilient. Assuming you can only lose 1 or 2 models a turn, then they could be really good. But I was like, oh my god, I've spent so long painting them up. I'm really happy with how they look. They're probably some of the best painted models I painted in terms of infantry, especially. It's like, dear god, I would not want to paint up another 5 of them, not for a long time, because it's all metallic paints. I followed predominantly Duncan's painting tutorial on Greyfax.
Yeah,
because that was a very similar colour scheme to the kind of standard Crusaders. It's tweaked slightly, so there's a bit more kind of bronzy gold colour scheme in there. It's like trying to bring up that kind of highlights of the metallics. and trying to do the final, I think like Stormhost Silver was a real pain because it just literally just was drying on your brush as you're sort of painting it on. It was just not quite painful to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I like the fact that you're so absolutely in favour of the Krieg's kind of mantra or kind of general, doctrine that you won't take any kind of abhumans within the list. You know, even though you probably knew that a unit of Bolgrins would have been infinitely better, you still decided that you want to take some kind of purist, kind of very spiritual, very pure humanity unit in the form of the Crusaders. It was good to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was two reasons for it. One of them was, for that reason, Bullgrins are the more competitive option. Also, I had the unit already built, and I had other plans for it. So originally, and I think, story-wise, they are the, shield maidens to the high princeps of the night world for the night army that I'm sort of slowly building up. So that's where they come from. That's why they've got the Skitarii Vanguard helmets, because they're sort of part mechanic, and there's sort of nice little backstory to them. And now they've sort of been requisitioned by the Inquisition, which is what I'll be using them for the foreseeable future. So they sort of tie in really nicely to that kind of aspect of my army.
Well, absolutely. But before you start talking about the Inquisition, you got a few more tanks still, right? You got a couple Hellhounds and some other bits in there, right?
Yeah, so on the fast attack options, I've got a 5-man Death Rider squad. Don't need to say any more about that. It does what it says. Then I've got 2 Hellhounds with Heavy Flamer and the standard Inferno cannon.
Yep.
They always tend to do quite well for me whenever I use them. Hit and miss sometimes, but always good fun, no matter what. Then for heavy support, I've got 2 Lehman Russes, just battle cannons and las cannons. So I've got 3 las cannons in total, including the HQ one.
Yeah.
2 regular battle cannons and just sort of the pimped out battle cannon. So that's a decent amount of anti-tank in my army.
No, I totally agree, mate. And they look great as a sort of force. Having those really awesome tanks as the sort of backbone of the army is definitely cool to see.
Yeah, it's I was thinking about wow, it's actually quite a tank heavy list, and it looks really nice. I've done a few touch ups on the models because one of them, the Punisher one, was the only one where I'd done mud effects on the tracks. So I, yesterday painted I basically covered myself and the shed in weathering powders by doing that effect. But they do look really good in it instantly, because before I'd done a really lazy, painted it black, dry brushed it silver, for the tracks, which was okay. But when you did weathering powders and then you use some sort of granite powder, which is you just take a lead pencil and shave off some filings with a knife, and then you basically dab your finger in that, and then you smear that on the tracks. It basically puts this really nice, realistic metallic sheen on all the raised edges. And when you do that, you go, oh wow, it looks really good.
Yeah.
So it just gives it that much more realistic look to those tanks than the previous one. So just doing that tight, because also again, no retreat, they really want to have a really consistent army. So they want an army where everything has to be based the same. And the army has to have a very kind of cohesive look to it. So they don't want something that's painted really well next to a model that's, painted half as good. So you've got to keep everything to the same level. So I knew I had to, if I painted the tracks on one of them and with weathering powders, I had to do that to all of them. So I had to spend a good day just doing that to make the consistency across the army.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, mate. But it looks good for it, I think. And, again, I think, to your point, saying it's tank heavy, I don't necessarily think is entirely accurate. I mean, you've got 6 tanks and quite a lot of bodies, but yeah, I mean, still, even them, it's a good looking force, and it's good that, I mean, it's a shame in a way that there wasn't the flexibility within the build to be able to incorporate in a super heavy tank, because I always feel like that's one of the cooler aspects of the guard lists or the Astra Militarum lists, when you've got those big imposing tanks. But I think you've made up for it in the volume that you have there, but also with what I assume you're going to talk about now, which is your inquisitorial retinue of, assorted ink 28 characters, right?
Although going back to the super heavies, there was like
Sure.
sort of a few reasons why I didn't do it this time. One, I ran a Gorgon super heavy last time, and that is actually a lot smaller than the sort of Baneblade chassis, and it was quite difficult to position it because the no retreat boards are quite terrain heavy. So trying to move a super heavy of that size is going to be really difficult.
Makes
And
sense.
also, Toke, the other Deathcore army player, is taking a Shadow Sword. And I didn't want to also take a Shadow Sword because then we'd have very similar looking armies because he's basically got a Shadow Sword, a Trojan, a bunch of Death Riders and some infantry. And it's like, I don't want to have just an identical looking list to him. I wanted to make sure our two armies looked very different. So that was another reason to not take a Shadow Sword, even though competitive, if I was to put my competitive hat on, is arguably the best thing to take. And the thing is, you could potentially just plonk it down and not have to move it because of you got the range. But they do have a lot of line of sight blocking terrain on their tables, so you don't necessarily your opponent could quite comfortably position a lot of their army in a way where your Shadow Sword can't see it, at least, turn one. So that might be an issue that he'll have in his games. I don't know. Hopefully I'll get a test game against him on Thursday or Friday and we can find out.
Well, absolutely. I mean, looking at his list as well, because I've just gone onto his Instagram page of Folkstorm. Is that him? Folkstorm? Folk?
Yeah, Fixstorm, yeah.
Folkstorm.
Folkae.
Yeah,
right?
that's the one. That's the one. And looking at what he's got there, I mean, there's some really nice weathering and things that he's incorporated into his stuff. And it's nice to see he's gone for the what is it? What was that extra tank he's taken? The thing that makes the Shadow Sword better, isn't it?
The Trojan, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one that gives it +1 ballistic skill, right?
No, it gives it reroll failed hits.
Oh yeah, that's it.
Is, arguably better, I think, because
he's going proper ham, isn't he?
A little bit, yeah. But if you actually look at the photos of his Trojan, he's modelled some extra interior detail within that whole kind of cab section. And I was like, oh my god, I always plan to just stick some crates in mine and cover the crates with tarp or something. And I've never got around to doing it because it's like I built it, I painted it. And then I was like, that's extra stuff that I'll never get around to doing. But I like the idea of it.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome, man. Well, let's talk about this inquisitorial retinue that you've brought to the table also.
Yeah, so I've got a Vanguard detachment for this one, which is my extra second detachment. So I've got Lady Eleanor Greyhorn is my new Inquisitor, but I run her as Eisenhorn. So she's 100 points, comes with an Artificer, Bolt Pistol, Barbarisator, which is her sword, a Ruin Staff, some Electrobane Grenades, which I always forget about, and then 2 Psychic Powers. So Dominates, you can target an enemy character, which is what I always keep forgetting, and you can make them shoot one weapon or make one close combat attack. So really great against knights that are characters. I always keep thinking it's anything big, but I keep forgetting that not everything is a character. So she's quite cool. That's like a good little gimmick. She's also got Terrify, which is select an enemy within 18 inches. That unit is -1 leadership, and they can't overwatch. So that can combo really well, potentially with my Crusaders or with the Death Riders if they're within range. Just so they can charge into something and not get overwatched is quite a handy one. And obviously she knows Smite, which as the fallback tends to be the best one. And she can cast 2 and deny 2. So she's a nice little anti sort of psyker. The Crusaders can also deny, but only on 1d6. Seems completely pointless.
Well, still, I mean, it's good to have the option, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, most powers, let's say even Smite, it'll go off on a 5. You'd have to roll a 6 to cancel it out. Yeah. So unless there's lots of powers that go off on a 3 or a 4, which I really doubt. So I mean, yeah, if I run out of anything of her doing her psychic, and I really am desperate, and there's also the niche that they rolled really badly, but it still went off, then yeah, I've got that. But for her, it's a really cool ability. She can also summon a demon host, which is her other cool ability. So you've still got to pay the reinforcement points for your normal demon host, but it gets kind of pimped up in terms of its superpowered. So it gets like a bunch of extra. I think it's like +2 to strength, toughness, wounds, and when you're within 6 inches of Eisenhorn, you get +1 to hit, +1 to wound, or no, maybe it's +1 to hit. It's definitely +1 to wound and +1 to your save. I think it's also +1 to hit as well. Because I think you hit on 4s normally, but this time you hit on 3s, so that makes them slightly better in that respect. But if you kill Eisenhorn, then the demon host automatically disappears, which is sort of like a weakness for that kind of thing. But it's a nice, like, little flavorful thing, and that was what the whole reason why I wanted to do the Inquisition was because I got into No Retreat, and I was like, I want to do something really thematic. And sort of colourful and something like a real good focal point to my army, because normally it's just very drab and grey and covered in mud. The characters are super tiny and not very visible.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, man. It does sort of add a really nice, unique flavour, and I know you've obviously been someone who's been really following the works of John Blanche and all the Ink 28 stuff, and I know you've tried to kind of inject that flavour into it. And I think, I know obviously as well you're looking at those potential Black Templar projects that you're working on or potentially working on at some point, and those kind of elements and those kind of units will definitely find a nice place within those armies. I mean, again, I think you and I both listened to that Voxcast podcast where they were talking to the guy who was talking about the beauty of having marine armies with all of their serfs and, all of their menials or whatever they're called, that kind of linger around the army, polishing guns or holding up bolt casing or bringing them more kind of, I don't know, scented oils while they're running around murdering things and all this kind of fun, the details in between the cracks, as it were, of 40k and what really brings those grim, dark elements to it. And I think that's what this retinue perfectly, exemplifies. That's what I really love about it, is that you've got a really beautiful assortment of mad nonsense that really makes this army feel... When I look at your army now with the addition of these models, I think it looks like the most 40k it's ever looked since you've sort of had it. I think before it was very Kriegy, and Krieg are 40k through and through, obviously, but with the addition of all these weird robed miscreants, it takes it to the next level, I think, as a 40k piece, at least.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got, because obviously the Astropath and the Ministorum Priest sort of look like they're part of her retinue as well, even though they're technically not. And similar with the Crusaders, even though they're technically part of Astra Militarum, in my head, they are like her personal bodyguards that are part of her sort of wider retinue. So it does all look together. So I've had to do, I've got 3 acolytes, which are my 3 elite choices. Because the demon host technically wouldn't be part of that, even though that's how I've listed it, or has to be listed in Battle Scribe. Yeah. But technically, he's a reinforcement point. Yep. So the 3 acolytes I've got, one of them has a bolt pistol and chainsword, who is, if you look on my Instagram, is basically a, it's like a servo pet, or they're called cyber familiars, is their technical term, because I read that in the Inquisitor book. It's in the game. So cyber familiars. So he's basically he's the Grinx cat from Yvrain with a servo skull head that has a bolt pistol mounted into it, and then his tail has been replaced with guitar wire to represent a mechadendrite, and on the end of that is a miniature chainsword that I cut up from a Astra Militarum chainsword and made super small. So that's one of my acolytes, which
that is bonkers. That is. I mean, when you actually look at the work that you've done on that, it's absolutely fantastic. The whole tiny little chainsaw that's like floating around on its tail. It's bananas, mate. I absolutely love that. That is fantastic. Was the skull head that you did with it a bit of a kind of chop job, as it were? Did you put it all together, or did that actually come as one whole piece?
That was one piece. That was so it was a resin piece. So I'm pretty sure it was from. I want to say it was one of the Forge World Inquisitors. I think it was. Oh, I can't remember which one. So it's the one that Richard's got. The kind of a small, skinny guy with the robed hood.
Oh, I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, but yeah.
It was his because I remember buying a few bits off of eBay. There's like a little because I wanted there's like a servitor with a scroll or something, so I got that rather than buying the whole kit, and that came with it. So it's been in my bits box for literally years, and I was like, oh, because I've made a few servo skulls just by taking some skulls and some plasticard and some sticking some bits in the eye and stuff like that. But I was like, no, this time I'm just going to use this piece because it looks great. And what prompted me to do that is, like, especially with the chainsaw, originally I was just going to have the regular tail on there, but I was like, oh, actually it needs to be WYSIWYG, so right, I'm going to do it properly WYSIWYG, so I'm going to stick a chainsaw on there. Oh, I'll stick it on the tail, that makes sense. And then originally I just had it on the chainsaw attached to the regular tail, but it just looked, the actual tail's quite flimsy, so then I was like, oh, actually no, I'll make that like mechadendrite tentacle type thing. So I've got the tile wire stuck that in there, which also makes it more robust.
Yeah.
The chance of that dropping on the floor and breaking would be quite high up. Well,
I just looked at Inquisitor Solomon Lock on Forge World.
That's it. Yeah.
And there is no such piece in that collection.
Do you know? I don't. It's definitely a Forge World piece, but
without a doubt. I'm curious now. We need to kind of go back and understand where that even came from. He does have a servo skull, but he is the servo skull is held up on kind of a ream of paper, so it's like a scribe. So it's like drawing. It's almost got like a Richter scale on a scribe that it's floating around on, and then he's also joined by a more kind of boring-looking servitor creature. But yeah, no sign of your bolt pistol head. That's going to be a journey of discovery for us both, I suppose, as we try and remember where that came from.
Yeah, unless it's Lord Hector Rex is the other option, I guess.
No, I checked him as well. No dice, mate. No dice of neither of the Inquisition models.
2 hours later.
So yeah, Phil, I actually have found where it's from. It's from the Titan Tech Priest kit. So yeah, not nearly as rare as we were thinking for a moment there, but still pretty cool.
And that's true, yeah, because I bought that model quite a long time ago just as my regular Tech Priest, because it's the same scale as the Krieg models. So I actually bought that one. It wasn't like an eBay purchase or anything.
Well, the thing is with that one as well is that particular servo skull, if you look at how they've modelled it on the Forge World website, is super weird because it's actually kind of held on by some very, very thin brass rod or something to that effect. So it's clearly not the most simplistic or user-friendly piece to stick to your model. So I'm not surprised you chose not to use it on your actual Tech Priest miniature.
Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense for a Tech Priest in terms of the rules, because I don't think he comes, or at least in 40k, he doesn't come with a bolt pistol.
Oh no, definitely not. Certainly not one being, brandished by a servo skull, that's for sure.
Yeah, so it was a nice little conversion piece. And then, speaking of other conversion pieces, so I've got another one that's armed with a needle pistol and a chainsword, which is my kind of surf character. So he's carrying all the equipment.
So that's the Chaos, what's in the face model, isn't it, with the speaker for a face?
Yes, so the Acolyte, Chaos Acolyte model. So I converted that up. So the book that the Chaos Disciple,
Dark Apostle is the name of the main model.
Dark Apostle, and they're his Dark Disciples, I think, or Acolytes. Maybe it's one of the two. Anyway, so yeah, it's the one with the kind of book dais. So I took the book from his hand and I modelled it back onto the dais. And then he's actually carrying all of Inquisitor Greyhorn's equipment. She's just got the sword and the rune staff. No, she's carrying the rune staff and a pistol, but technically needs to also be carrying the book that she uses to summon the demon host, because that's a piece of war gear, as well as grenades and a sword, even though Eisenhorn's not modelled with the sword. So I was like, okay, but I want to be WYSIWYG, so this character's carrying all of her gear. So he technically doesn't have his own gear because he's carrying hers. That's the other thing, but I can, have him also carrying his as well. There's no room for it.
Yeah, exactly. He's become the mule, essentially.
Yeah, and then the last acolyte is Manfred Wilhelm, who's a model I based off of a Sharp character. So he's got a bolt pistol, which he's carrying in his hand, and then a storm bolter, which is shoulder mounted. So he's based on the Necromunda Enforcers, Palatine Enforcers, because I really like that. And I was like, oh, these will make perfect sort of bodyguards or associates to the Inquisitor. So I've only managed to convert one up. I'd quite like to do a few more, potentially. Yeah. I did a shoulder-mounted Stormbolter, sort of similar to some of Eisenhorn's those. And then he's got this kind of old-style pistol, which is the same one as the Enforcer, but I've done a ton of conversion work on it. So I've given him, like, this leg brace on one arm. I've given him, like, a wig that I sculpted out of green stuff, but it's not on him. It's actually mounted or being held on a skull that is around his belt. And then sort of like messed up his face a bit, so it looked all scarred and stuff. So I put lots of extra little detail onto him. So interesting one to do.
He looks fantastic, man. I didn't even realise you'd put that that skull with a wig on him. I just seen that now, looking at the picture. That's really cool. Very cool.
And I did. So I also sculpted and cast it up. I did like an ammo belt and like a feed belt and a backpack. But to be able to sculpt the ammo feed, it's like that needs to be able to bend. So basically, scratch build it all out of plasticast, cast it up in silicone, cast that up into resin, which I could then heat up and bend it around. But it could work. It was literally the only way to do it. But it was like a sort of project that went from, this will be a nice little addition, like a sort of 2-day job or more, or just getting that one bit done. But it looks pretty fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forward, I think.
There's a lot of effort for a toughness-free, one-wound character, right?
I mean, they used to be 4 wounds. No, was it 4 wounds? Yeah, it was something like 3 or 4 wounds in the original book, but then they FAQ'd it to be 1 wound because abusing it too much. So you're like, okay. And then there's these 2 last models. There's obviously the Demon Host, which I talked about, who's sort of in reserve summoning points. And there's also, I'm spending 2 CPs on the Assassin stratagem to summon 1 Assassin. Yep. So I've got 3 that I can possibly take: the Eversaw, the Vindicare, and the I always get these wrong. Calidus.
Correct. Not the Caluxus. Caluxus is the anti-psychic.
Yes, that's it. So I've got those 3 purely because I've never got around to painting the other one because I don't really rate it all that much.
No, that's fair enough, mate. That's fair enough. But yeah, no, look, I mean, in essence, man, it sounds like it looks like a really good list, and it sounds like a fun one to play. And I think you've done some really incredible work on producing the miniatures, and you always hold yourself to a very high standard, and it shows in the work that you're doing. Like you say, I mean, obviously the competition is heating up when it comes to No Retreat, so the likelihood of you walking away with, the best painted army and things of that nature may or may not become your reality this time around. But at the same time, man, I mean, you've got a great looking force with some really interesting original stuff in there. You've mixed up things in a really interesting way. You can very clearly see that you put a lot of really great work into it, and I'm sure the guys who come along and play against you will really appreciate that. And I think, mate, at the end of the day, it's not an uncompetitive list. Sure, if it came up against a highly optimized tournament-heavy list, it would probably, struggle in certain matchups, but you've got a lot of options still there, man, and, you've got enough bodies that you can control objectives, and you've got enough firepower that you can deal with, armor and mass infantry and other things, so there's a lot of flexibility in that list, and I think there's a lot of creativity as well. So I think it should be fun, and if not anything else, it's it's a weekend of fun gaming, if nothing else. So yeah, man, I'm excited for you. I look forward to discovering how you get on.
Cheers. Well, I already know my first matchup because they've announced the pairs. So I'm up against a guy who's got 2 demon hosts, 3 plague burst crawlers, and about 60 plague bearers. So I think my first match is going to be a super tough one.
I don't know necessarily though, man, because you can get stuck right on into that. And the thing is, you know, you got a lot of shots in all your infantry. You got a lot of shots from your Punisher. You got a lot of shots from, you know, the flamers and other things, and you've got things that can, you know, that can hurl themselves into them and cause them aggravation. And I think that's important to remember, is that, you know, the thing about these Nurgle armies is they're not very mobile. Now, okay, fair enough, Plague Burst Crawlers are super optimized and super frustrating, but they're still just one little thing, and a lot of the time they need to be kind of wrapped or closely associated to the hordes of other things. So if you can charge into the hordes and then, you know, tag some of those Plague Burst Crawlers without actually getting in, you know, without having to take Overwatch from them, you'll be alright. You'll be fine. The Death Riders will get it done alongside everything else. It'll be cool.
Yeah, I think that was my plan. I'm still just toying up the idea about taking the what's best assassin stake. So it's either the Vindicare to try and kill the 2 kind of Pox Walkery type buffing characters, or just take an Eversaw to try and get stuck in there, killing them in close combat.
Vindicare 100% in that matchup, because if you kill the buffs, the army really struggles. So taking out the, you know, Blighty Piper and the Scrivener and all the other stuff is the way forward. So yeah, you want to kill the infrastructure, you want to kill the command infrastructure, and then you just have to try and out fatigue the army. But the thing is your damage output is greater than theirs based on the fact that you've got efficient effectiveness in the shooting phase and the combat phase, whereas they just predominantly exist within the combat phase. And if you close the gap early doors, then you don't have to deal with the ongoing harassment of the Plague Burst Crawlers, because what the Plague Burst Crawlers want you to do is stay away, or they want to control the kind of tempo of the game. If you become, if you make yourself a problem, or you don't just do what they want you to do, which is sit back and be scared, then you tend to win that matchup. But there's a lot of armies that just bounce off of a Plague Burst Crawlers, and to a certain extent, your army is one of those. But it's not about the bounce; it's about tar pitting it and keeping them in their deployment zone and harassing them. Because the thing that you've got over, assuming you can get control of the Plague Burst Crawler situation, you've got a much better advantage. Also, as well, those Hellhounds are hilarious in that matchup, because literally, if I were you, I'd just literally turn one and just be like forwards with Hellhounds, just hurling them at them, because those things are just kamikaze loons. So just those on one flank, Death Riders on the other, you know, Crusaders taking up the middle, and then just have your boys running around, and then yeah, Vindicare popping off a few characters here, there, and everywhere, and you know, you might be able to outweather him, mate. But at the same time, you know, Plague Burst Crawlers are anything but, well, they are top tier, is what I'm trying to say. They are good, so it'll be a tough one, mate. But I believe in you. You can do it.
I'll have to check in with you by the next podcast and let you know how to win.
Well, exactly, mate. That's the trick, you see. I've given you all this great information, which you'll probably say, yeah, Dan, I followed your advice. Awful. I got absolutely hosed down. I'll be like, okay, fair enough. Maybe before the game starts, send me pictures of like your map, and I can offer you advice on a deployment setup or something. We can do one of those like dating scenarios where you've got like an earpiece in, and I can tell you what to say and what to do. It'd be brilliant.
Yeah, let's see how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. It'd be like the doubles tournament we did all over again.
Yay!
Anyway, look, mate, thanks very much for taking the time to take us through it all. Hope you have fun, and obviously if anyone is interested in learning more about No Retreat and SA Battle Reports, just search for both those things on the internet and you'll find information. But conveniently, I have taken it upon myself to put links in the description below, so if you want to go look at that and click through to the relevant destinations, please do so. So with that said, guys, we're going to transition now to whatever it is that comes next. Lord only knows, because this is a bit of a, disjointed process this time around. But nonetheless, Let's see what occurs. Thank you. Woo! And that concludes episode 30 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. As always, thank you very much for checking out the show. Obviously, it's cool that you made it this far. And as a special treat for you, we're in fact joined momentarily by the most beautiful boy known from the south of England. I'm speaking, of course, of the illustrious, stupendous, fabulously handsome, overwhelmingly charismatic, and regrettably a little bit smelly, good old Joe. How you doing, pal?
Good. Your descriptions of me always get longer and longer every time.
It's true.
Probably less and less true the more you say it.
Well, exactly. Although there was a little kernel of truth in that overriding statement, I would say. I'll let the listeners decide which one of those many Joe facts is the accurate one.
Well, maybe we should do for Christmas like a Lookout Sir kind of like calendar.
Oh yeah, what 12 months of Joe?
Or we get all of us involved, all the guys involved. We have Phil. I feel like Phil's a Christmas though. He's like a Christmas jumper.
It's true. It's true. You can imagine him out in front of a woodshed with an axe over his shoulder.
Yeah, but only the axe and the Christmas jumper, and
Absolutely.
that's it.
Absolutely, and he can have a old school flamer template masking his manhood.
Yeah, because you've got to get the Warhammer theme in there.
Obviously. Yeah, absolutely. He can have just one of those blast markers just covering himself up. Hurrah!
That'd be beautiful. I feel like Richie would be Easter.
Yeah, you think he's got a bit of an Easter Bunny vibe to him?
Yeah, just the ears and some eggs.
And he can have, like, the old vortex grenades covering up his nipples.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
Whatever happened to those vortex grenade markers from back in the day? They had the vortex grenade, and then it became a webway portal, correct?
What? Yes.
It was like some weird little plasticky dome that you got, wasn't it?
Well, it was actually metal.
Was it metal?
It was metal. It was
Never owned one.
With like a covering. I always wanted one, but they're always a limited run. And they were great. But the vortex grenade was only available in Apocalypse at the time.
Yeah.
And I found that everyone that ran that basically gave it to Sly Marbo, and then he'd turn up, throw it, miss, hit himself, and then get sucked off the table.
Yeah, that's usually how it went. Yeah.
They were really cool for Dark Eldar players, though, because having like a little webway portal you could chuck down.
Well, there's someone selling a vortex grenade template on eBay for £7.25 with only £3 postage.
That's quite steep. I think that's probably more than what it was when it came out.
Well, obviously, but it's not out anymore, is it? So if you want it, there's one here for $14.99. $14.99.
But I don't understand. The second-hand sales thing is always a weird one, because especially when people try and do the buy it now, because like it's a redundant piece of equipment. It means nothing now. I quite like the idea if maybe the stratagem for a webway portal nowadays was you threw one of those down. That would be cool.
But anyway, Vortex, templates aside, what have you been up to while being sick this week, Joe, that meant you couldn't appear on the show up until now?
I've painted mostly. I played a bit of Borderlands 2. And
Borderlands 2, hey?
Not Borderlands 2, Borderlands 3. It's a great game. Play that. But I painted mostly. That's all I ever seem to do. I've got a tournament in like a week and... Well, when this comes out, it'll be in a week's time.
Yep.
And I've got 5.5 intercessors to paint.
Mm-hmm.
So I said 5 half painted, 5 I still need to fully paint, 2 whirlwinds, 2 storm talons, and half an Invicta warsuit.
Crikey, that's quite a considerable amount.
Oh, and new Tech Marine dude, and a Primaris Librarian. I forgot about them.
You do know, though, you're going to a 40k Brawl event, so you don't actually need to paint everything.
Well, I read the rules pack, and they explicitly say, like in every rules pack, that your army has to be at least 3 colours.
Well, of course, but then you'll turn up and half the people who are playing on the top tables use it as an opportunity to test all sorts of nonsense, and it turns out none of it's painted.
Yeah. So I need to go fully painted. I can't let myself not go. That's the problem now. But I'm a big believer that tournaments, like, although they are competitive gaming, should encompass all parts of the hobby.
I see.
And all parts of the hobby includes building and painting your models.
No, I totally agree with you. Except for the fact that I don't, in as much as I don't. I agree with you, I just don't act upon those wise words.
Yeah, because you go to some events and there's people who have literally spent like 4 or 5 grand on their army, because it's all Forge World, like nutcases like Phil, and then they've spent all this time painting it, and they've got this beautiful army on the table. Then you've got some Trevor turning up with his 3 Baneblades.
Oh, Trevor, why won't you learn?
He spray painted it black, and then using green, done some green stripes on it with a spray paint, and then used the tan one to do some tan stripes on it. And he goes, there we go, it's done. And the comparison is mind-blowing when you see them on the table next to each other.
Yeah.
It's almost like a little bit of an insult. I can understand that if people like can't paint, just choose to kind of cut corners that way. But at least try.
At least try. The wise words from Joe. At least try. Which, to be fair to you, Joe, even though I gave you a lot of rubbish for it, you did at least try. Here you are.
Yeah. If all else fails, I'll change my list on the day and run pure Dark Elder and be done with it. And
absolutely. That is usually a perfectly valid tactic for you.
Then I'll lose to an Iron Hands player.
You can always borrow my Imperial Knight army if you like.
That is a good valid point, actually.
You can always borrow that, mate. I'm happy to lend it to you. It'll give you an incentive to finish painting that Crusader.
Yeah, that is true.
So why don't you finish painting the Crusader that you owe me, and then take the Imperial Knight army to the tournament, and then you might win.
Yeah, but he'll take me longer than a week.
Nah, come on now. You're a skilled painter.
Maybe. It's a strong, definitely maybe. Maybe not, possibly.
Who could say with that level of certainty? Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's solid, we'll see.
Absolutely. That is a firm, I don't know for sure, but maybe. Nonetheless, that has been episode 30 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. Thank you, Joe, for, feeling it necessary, or at least turning up and contributing to the show. It's never the same without you, to be fair. So I didn't want to conclude the 30th episode without a little bit of Joe.
Yeah. I also kind of feel like I'm the only one available to do this closing section, so...
Oh, no, me and Phil recorded a different one yesterday, but
really?
I started editing this evening, and I went, well, Joe actually randomly is available and can talk again, so I tried it, yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I may listen to the two of them side by side and decide not to use this one because it's a bit rambly by comparison, but...
Yeah, but that's what people love. Give the people what they want.
Well, that's sort of the vibe. I had a nice fella say nice things on the Facebooks today. That was very lovely. That was quite cool. So, on our Facebooks, this nice fella, whose name I am struggling to find, but I will do momentarily, Andrew gave us a nice little mention on the old Facebooks. That was actually quite a current event. That happened literally minutes ago. Before recording this section, which is why I called it out. So I don't want to give the impression that we get so few comments on Facebook that when one happens, it's such a monumental event that it requires us shouting it out. But
we do a whole podcast about it.
Exactly. Let's do a whole podcast about the nice thing Andrew said about us, which was that he drives around a lot and he likes the show. Hey? And if Andrew likes it, I mean, who else potentially could? I mean, and that's the thing, guys. Tell your friends, because you may know an Andrew, and they may be missing Lookout Sir 40k in their life, and you can bring that to them. It's almost Christmas. We're coming to the end of the year. Give the gift of Lookout Sir to your friends.
Yeah, but only if they're called Andrew.
Well, yeah, predominantly Andrews. We do well with the Andrews. We've got two I've at least seen 2 people who like us called Andrew.
That's right, at least 2 of the 4.
Exactly. Of the 4 people, 2 of them are Andrews. There's Ginger Andrew and this Andrew. Not that Ginger Andrew probably appreciates being called Ginger Andrew, but I'm a little bit reluctant to say people's full names on the internet in case they want to maintain a certain level of, discrimination. Not discrimination. Ah! No! That's not the word! What's the word I'm looking for?
Are you discriminating against the genres?
Yes, that's potentially true. Not discrimination. What was that? What was the word? Definitely wasn't discrimination. I can't think now. It was a word that was going to make sense in my brain. A degree of discretion. No. Discreetness. Was that what I was going for? I have no idea anymore. But nonetheless, there you go. Thanks very much, Andrews, for saying nice things about the show on a consistent basis. We do it all for you and the money. We haven't made any money yet, but one day it'll come.
Like this ending is less and less likely to make the cut.
No, it will. I think if anything, it's more and more likely to make the cut all the way through. But yeah, go check out our social medias. Joe, what must they do?
Go on to the Facebooks and look out 40k, or we look out apostrophe. Look out, exclamation
something like that. I was expecting you just to go like and subscribe and, pretty much wrap it up like that.
Yeah, but...
come on, Joe, say it. Say it. Right. Say the words.
Like and subscribe.
Yay, there you go. Yay. Bye-bye, everybody. Come on, Joe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.